My name is Alex. This story is 100% true. It's not so much scary as it is mysterious. At the age of 6, in 1996, we moved to a farm in western Iowa. I knew the house was old, although I wasn't sure how old exactly. It was very beautiful. A rich family had clearly built it, as it was nicer than most of the farmhouses in the area. It had gorgeous woodwork, carvings, and etchings above all the doors and windows, etc. It was large, too, with 6 bedrooms and 2 baths. I always felt an energy in the house, but not a malevolent energy. It was just like, wow, you could almost feel the history here. Over the next several years, there were some paranormal occurrences, but nothing scary. Some unexplainable sounds, doors closing, temperature drops, and so on. We never felt that anything wanted to do us harm, but rather it, or they, just wanted to make their presence known. I also had some recurring dreams about the house itself. I dreamt on several occasions of being at that house, in the past. I was there, and there were many people gathered inside and out, like a party. Then, a young couple steps up onto the porch, and a wedding is held. It was a happy and mysterious dream. I had no idea who the people were or exactly when this was taking place. Over the next several years, we did learn a bit about the house's history. It was finished in the fall of 1919, and it was indeed built by a wealthy family. They actually owned several farms in the area. However, a dozen or so years later, they did lose this particular farm and house due to some bad decisions made. It was the Depression after all. Throughout the 1930s, a few different sharecroppers rented it from the bank and worked the land. Then, in 1939, another family bought it, and we knew that they lived there for at least 10 or 15 years. We weren't sure until the people after them purchased the house and land in 1962. Those were the people that we bought it from in 1996. One day, in the summer of 2010, I'm home from college and we have a surprise visitor. It was an older man, and he said that his mother had lived in our house many decades prior and that she's very old now. She was actually living not too far away in a nursing home. He inquired if it would be alright for him to bring her for a visit on one of her outings. My mother and I said of course it would be alright, and that I would enjoy talking to her about those older times. A few weeks later, he brought her over. Her name was Carmen. She was now 89, and it turns out that her family were the ones who had moved in the spring of 1939. They were immigrants from Germany who had come over in the early 20s. Her father actually had been a submarine captain in the German Navy during World War I, and this farm was their first real home after nearly 20 years of moving, working, and saving. They painted the house that spring of 39, and her mother and father just adored the property. Carmen then said, "I was married on this front porch, you know, in June of 1946. I couldn't believe it. I stammered to speak, and I said, "You know, that is amazing, because I've had dreams about a wedding here. So strange." She then dropped a bombshell as far as I was concerned. She told me that in the 1940s, before she married and moved away, she had numerous dreams about meeting a young man and his family here as an old woman. She then said, "I'm old. I know I've got very little time. But when I heard about you, a young man and a new family living here, well, I just had to come see." I told her I was very happy she had, and we then went on to discuss what's going on. Was it a coincidence? Was the house alive and able to see through time? She said she had no idea, but she agreed something weird was going on. For her to have her dream in the 40s, my dreams 50 years later, and then to meet a decade after that, it was just too strange. We felt some connection at that point. She then spoke up and told me about her father. She said that he fell ill rapidly in early 1950, and he died later that year, not in the house. But he did tell Carmen and her mother not to cry, that he would see them again, and that he'll meet them at the front porch and take them to heaven. So he repeated, "Go to the front porch. I'll meet you there. Don't get lost." She elaborated and said that he firmly believes spirits get to choose when they cross over to face the Lord, and that he wanted to wait for both his wife and daughter to pass so that they could all go together. It was really sweet. Her mother died of old age in 1988, and her husband, Oscar, had died in 2004. She was the last one. She had brought a scrapbook full of photos, and we spent the rest of the afternoon looking at some old photos of the farm and the house. I really enjoyed this. We actually made plans for me to visit her in a week or two at the nursing home, and she left. Exactly 1 week later, in the middle of the afternoon, I got a phone call. Her son informed me that Carmen had passed away in the wee hours of the morning. He said that she was extremely happy after her visit, and that she sort of seemed detached, like she had finished the last thing on a list. He said he would call me in a day or two about the details for her funeral, and of course I wanted to go. I hung up the phone and walked out onto the front porch. It was an extremely hot, humid day. I looked over and the porch swing was gently rocking. There was no breeze at all, and I was home alone. I waved and said, "I'm happy we met, and maybe I'll see you on the other side," and I walked back in. In the night, I've been reading creepypastas and horror stories on No Sleep for well over 2 years now. I've always wanted to write one of my own, but I've never had anything particularly terrifying or worth writing about happen to me. That is until last night. The thing about me is that I'm a night owl. I go to sleep around 4 a.m. and usually wake up later than I care to admit, so being awake late at night isn't anything new to me. I was up last night around 2 in the morning browsing No Sleep, reading story after story, and overall enjoying myself. Eventually, I grew tired enough to log off and attempt to fall asleep, so that's what I did. I turned off my computer, turned off my nightstand lamp, and climbed into bed. I fell asleep after my first half hour of trying, but my sleep would not last long. Around an hour into my sleep, my computer woke me up. For whatever reason, my computer turns on by itself, sometimes during the night. This isn't some supernatural or extraordinary phenomenon, it's just something it does. Nonetheless, when it does turn on, the power light is just enough to dimly illuminate the room, and the sound of the fan spinning up is just enough to wake me from a light sleep. Anyways, the computer turned on sometime around 3, and in turn, woke me up. Despite being awakened from my sleep, this is where my nightmare began. I woke up for a moment as I usually do when my computer boots up in the night and looked around my room. I glanced towards the light emitting from the computer and put my head back down once I saw the white glow filling the darkness around my desk. However, when I closed my eyes, the image of my ill-lighted bedroom was still in my mind. There were the dark outlines of my dresser, my desk, my chair, my side table, and my lamp. And something else. There was another shape in the dark, a shape that should not have been there. I picked my head back up to look again and saw the intrusive silhouette in the corner of my room. There was a figure. There was the unmistakable outline of a man standing in the corner of my room, right at the edge of where the light reached. The instant I saw it, I felt intense goosebumps rush across my body and my neck tensed up. At this moment, I could feel fear consuming me, but I was still right-minded. As I said, I'm a night owl. I'm used to seeing nothing but the silhouettes of the things in my room, and I know how from a certain angle, these silhouettes can look like something they aren't. Something like a man, for example. I broke free from the terror consuming me and attempted to gain some level-headedness. I managed to sum up enough courage to take some sort of action to resolve the situation I found myself in. I reached for my phone and shined the LED light towards the corner of the room where the figure resided. I needed to have absolute certainty that it was in fact a person. The light did not reach far enough for me to see any detail, but much to my horror, it lit up the area enough for me to put my doubt to rest. I nearly dropped my phone upon my revelation. It was a man, a tall man at that, easily over 6 feet, and he was just standing there, lurking in the dark outskirts of my room. I had been frightened from the moment I saw the shadow in my room, but that was because I didn't know what or who the figure was. But once I knew, my fear shifted but escalated nonetheless. I then had a horde of new terrifying thoughts filling my mind. Instead of fearing what the figure was, I was fearing what the figure would do. I felt my shoulders tighten and my stomach clench. My heart had been beating fast from the start, but once I discovered that it was in fact a person residing in my room, the beating sped up to the point that I thought my heart would surely burst. Whenever you hear or see something strange in the middle of the night, you become overcome with fear. I've been startled by bumps in the night before, but my fear had always been of the unknown. But I knew what was there. And the fear that was eating at me then was the fear of a man and the unimaginable horror that he brought with him. I was aware of the presence in the room, yet I couldn't bring myself to do anything about it. I wanted to close my eyes to shield myself from the possible horror that may come upon me. But at the same time, no longer being aware of my surroundings seemed like an equally, if not more horrific, condition. I just laid there in complete silence, save for the loud noise and frequent beating of my heart, watching the man in my room. I didn't realize the full extent of the situation I found myself in for a few moments, but once I did, it added a sense of panic to the horror I was already battling. I realized that this seemingly endless nightmare would truly be endless if I did not take some sort of action against the man. I was physically frozen in fear, but internally my mind was screaming at me to act, and my heart was beating like a jackhammer. I remember wishing that I could just close my eyes and go back to sleep. I did try once, but the very moment I closed my eyes, my mind would bellow to me the horror I was facing and force me to open them. The rapid beating of my heart kept me on edge, and my mind kept racing with scattered, horrific thoughts. The thoughts were half-formed, none of them making total sense, but all beckoning the same message of sheer terror. I would try to grasp the situation, but the panic and fear was too overbearing and prevented me from thinking anywhere near logically. I tried to compose myself, but I couldn't will myself back to calmness. However, I did manage to think about my options. I knew I wasn't going to be able to attack, or if need be, disarm the man. Instead, I reasoned that maybe I could escape my room before the man could get to me. After I decided on my plan, a new thought brought me another layer of dread to add to the already intense fear residing in me. I realized that in order to get to the door, I would have to walk closer to the man. This realization made me think for a moment about what the man had done and was doing in my room, just standing. He had made no advancement towards me, and besides bringing me immense horror, had done nothing. Was he studying me? Was this some sicko just trying to torment me? What was happening? What would happen? I grabbed my phone and began my escape attempt by starting to remove my blanket from atop of me. I did this slowly in hopes that the man might not see it and therefore not take any action. However, I realized that his eyes had surely adjusted to the darkness. The idea that my slow and hesitant motions were showing the man that I was afraid brought me a quick shudder of terror, but I continued. As soon as I got the blanket off my legs, I launched myself out of bed and lunged towards the door. I tried to keep my eyes on the man to see if he reacted, but my main focus was the door and my vision was blurred in the darkness. I got to the door and slammed my hand onto the doorknob, turning it frantically. It wouldn't budge. The sense of panic that rushed into me was unbearable. You know that feeling of urgent fear you used to get as a kid when you turn off the light in the hall and ran from the darkness into the safety of your bedroom? It was like that, except there was nowhere to escape to, and nothing to release me from the cloak of terror that was quickly engulfing me. I was within reaching distance of the man, yet my one means of escape was taken away from me. In my scrambled state of mind, I hadn't realized the door was locked for a moment and kept turning the knob over and over. I never locked my door, therefore the man must have done so before I awoke. But why lock the door if he meant to do nothing with his victim? I snatched my hand upward to the lock, praying the man wasn't closing in on me, though was expecting a hand to clasp on my shoulder at any moment. I felt no such thing, but I did hear something just as frightening. I heard the man breathing. It was a heavy and raspy breathing, like a smoker or an older person would have. The breathing was speeding up, as if he was preparing to do something. This thought only added another horrible layer of panic to my quickly vanishing state of mind. My spine was shocked with not just a chill, but more so a spout of frostbite. My heart felt like it was no longer beating in individual beats, but was rather constantly and rapidly vibrating to the point where the only place left for it to go was either to explode or stop altogether. My hands were shaking worse than they ever had before, but I managed to get them around the lock switch. I flipped the lock and flung the door open. I burst out of the doorway and turned for the stairs. I'm amazed I didn't kill myself flying down the stairs at the speed I was moving. I ran 3 steps at a time down the staircase, and once onto the ground floor, sprinted to the front door. The front door was locked, as my bedroom door had been, but this door was always locked, so this did not unnerve me. I turned the lock and opened the door, and made my way out into the night air. I was breathing quite heavily at this time, but I continued nonetheless. I sprinted up the street and didn't stop until I felt I was a safe distance from my house. The man was, to my relief, not following me. I took out my phone and quickly called 911 and alerted the police of the situation. Shortly after, 2 police cars were sent to my house, and the officers did a full sweep of the house. I doubted the man was still there, and my suspicion was confirmed when they informed me that they had found nothing. I only told them that there had been a man in my room, and after seeing him I ran. I didn't bother telling them how long I had seen him just standing there, or that he didn't seem to do anything during his time terrorizing me. If I had told them this, they probably would have told me I was imagining it due to being tired. But I know what I saw, and I know it was real. I stayed at a hotel for about a week after this nightmare occurred, just to be safe and make sure I wasn't being followed or anything. But despite the inactivity that followed, and despite the police officers' assurances that it was over, I still didn't feel safe. Had the man been in my house before? Could he have returned by now and is hiding, waiting for me? Would this ever end? I don't know if I'll ever sleep well again. Even as I write this now, in the supposed safety of my home, I dread having to fall asleep. All I know is that if my computer turns on again in the dead of the night, I won't be waking up to look. Whatever the man planned on doing, or not doing, couldn't be worse than the hell I had to experience by laying there helplessly in sheer horror for what felt like an eternity of darkness. My mind is still plagued by the never-ending thread of horrific thoughts and unanswerable questions revolving around the man and his intentions. Every shadow I see causes me to jump, and when walking through my home, my eyes are constantly darting from corner to corner. The nightmare I had suffered through that horrific night has ended, but the nightmare that is living the rest of my life in this constant state of fear has only begun. When I was 15 years old, my dad got promoted in the company he works for. He and my mom were very excited. He worked really hard to get the position and finally achieved his goal. The promotion also came with a steep pay raise, and after I found out about the promotion, I was excited too, at first. Once I learned we had to move halfway across the country, any sense of excitement or happiness quickly disappeared. I was at an age where I finally made some good friends in the early years of high school, and I dreaded being the new kid at another school. I begged my parents to let me stay with another relative or a friend, but they said no. I then begged to be homeschooled, and that didn't work either. So, a few weeks later, we were all packed up and on our way to the new house. The house itself was pretty impressive, and my bedroom was also much larger. The area we moved to was pretty secluded as well. It was the type of road where your neighbors were at least a quarter to a half mile away from you. We had a large front yard and an even larger backyard. Beyond our backyard were a good amount of woods. I spent a lot of my time exploring around in the woods. It was beautiful, quiet, and just overall peaceful. I definitely warmed up to the home and the surrounding property, but still hated the idea of going to a new school. The following Monday after we moved, I started at the school. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and a bit lonely, but I made it through okay. The week went by, and I slowly began making friends. When Friday arrived, my parents had plans to go out and celebrate my dad's promotion. I was staying at home alone, and had planned on enjoying the night to myself. My parents left around 8 p.m., and I settled in on the couch to watch some TV. After about 20 minutes of this, I heard a rather faint knocking on my front door. This startled me a bit, as I wasn't expecting anyone, so I walked over to look out the peephole to see who it was. I couldn't see anyone, so I opened the door. I looked around, but there was no one there. I figured it was either the wind making noise, kids playing a prank, or it was just some noise on the TV that mimicked a knocking noise. I settled in back on the couch and continued watching my show. Not even 5 minutes went by, and I heard the same faint knocking. This time, I was positive what it was and where it came from. I was definitely unsettled at this point, so I creeped over to peek out again. Just like last time, I saw no one. Against my better judgment, I opened the door to get a better look outside. I saw and heard no one again. I shut the door and locked it and went back to the couch. I felt very uncomfortable, and my senses were a bit on high alert. Not even a minute later, I heard the stairs leading up from the basement creak. I froze. I turned the TV to mute and didn't move a muscle. After a few seconds, I heard another step begin to creak, and then another. At first, I planned on running out the front door, but I would have to go right past the door to the stairs to the basement first. Once I got up and headed to the front door, the basement door began to open. I would run right into whoever was there if I continued to the front door. The next best thing I could do was head directly upstairs, so that's what I did. I ran down the hallway to my bedroom and shut the door. I pushed my dresser in front of it and hid. I checked my pockets for my cell phone but realized I left it downstairs somewhere. I started booting up my computer so I could try messaging my parents for help. My computer seemed to take forever to load, and at this point, I heard the intruder opening up the doors to the other rooms as he came down the hall. Once they got to my room, they tried entering it. They were stopped at first from the lock, but were able to break the door open. Every time they hit into the door, the dresser moved inwards. I tried opening an app to message my parents, but I knew it wouldn't help in time. I went over to the window and opened it up. Looking down, I could see it was a far drop. My bedroom was on the second story, but it was a further drop down than most with just how it was set up. I figured if I jumped, there was a good chance I would get too hurt to be able to get away. The only thing I was able to do would be to climb out of my window onto the awning that wrapped around the house, but I didn't want to be stuck there with someone after me. I had a quick idea and decided to take one of my shoes and throw it to the ground below my window. I then climbed out, hopped down to the awning, and snuck my way around to the part on the back of the house. I did this, hoping the man would look out the window to see where I went, and once he saw the shoe on the ground, he would think I jumped to the ground and ran away, losing my shoe in the process. My heart was racing, but I sat as still as possible and prayed my plan worked. It seemed like hours went by, but it must have only been minutes. but eventually I heard a door shut from my house and heard footsteps retreating away. I waited a few more minutes and climbed back into my window, ran downstairs, and grabbed my phone. I called 911 and then my parents. The police looked into everything, but I didn't even see the intruder, nor could I even tell them if it was a man or a woman. Needless to say, the guy or girl was never caught. My dad put a really sophisticated security system in our house, which makes me feel more comfortable now. I'm still not positive why the person first knocked on the front door, but my dad suspects it was to distract me so the person could sneak in through the basement without being heard to sneak up on me. Thank God for those creaky steps. Although it unsettles me to know the person is still out there, I'm just happy to have escaped the situation with my life. Thank you to all who watched this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really sorry, but I started losing my voice throughout it, and I did the best I could, so please don't hate me. Please follow me on Twitch for live streams and other narrations, which I will be uploading there. The link is in the description. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you soon.